But we begin tonight with big news out of the Middle East. Hamas and Israel have finalized a ceasefire deal that will release the remaining hostages and ensure the departure of Israeli forces from Gaza. The news was greeted with jubilation and tears from Tel Aviv to Khan Yunis because it's the first time there is real hope in the region. The announcement comes just days before the transfer of power from President Biden to Donald Trump. Now, if this feels like historical deja vu, it's probably because a similar situation happened in 1981 when American hostages being held at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran were freed just as Ronald Reagan took over from Jimmy Carter.
Good evening on the 444th and final day of the hostage crisis, which is also the first day of the new Reagan presidency.
Here is how NBC's correspondent explained that deal.
On the plane coming over, the Carter party told reporters that Iran will wind up with only $3 billion after withholdings for claims and repayments of loans. That Carter was close to agreement 3 times and almost had one just before the election. That the final deal was sealed at 9 o'clock yesterday morning, Washington time, but the takeoff was probably held off just to embarrass Carter one more time.
A prominent Democratic politician at the time told the New York Times that he was a witness to Republican efforts to prevent the hostages from being freed before Election Day. President Biden is trying to avoid a repeat of what happened to Carter and make clear that this deal was the fruit of his administration's labor.
More than 15 months of conflict that began with Hezbollah's brutal massacre on October the 7th. More than 15 months of terror for the hostages, their families, the Israeli people. More than 15 months of suffering by the innocent people of Gaza. Fighting in Gaza will stop, and soon the hostages will return home to their families. The elements of this deal were what I laid out in detail this past May, which was embraced by countries around the world and endorsed overwhelmingly by the UN Security Council.
President Biden and his national security team have been working for over a year to get Israel and Hamas to sign off on a deal. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has taken 12 trips to the region since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7, 2023. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and CIA Director William Burns have made frequent trips to the region as well. And President Biden is correct that this deal appears to be the exact same proposal that he announced last May. What changed? Trump, who will assume office on Monday at noon. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made it no secret that he prefers Trump and wanted to deliver him a win. The Washington Post reported that Israel would gift something to Trump, but it was believed to be a deal on Lebanon. According to reports, Netanyahu has been speaking with Trump for months while Trump was campaigning for re-election. Trump previously told Axios that Netanyahu never wanted peace with the Palestinians, but Trump told him to do what he had to do with Hamas. Additionally, some of the parents of hostages and Israeli soldiers have been livid at Prime Minister Netanyahu, accusing him of being deceitful and of intentionally extending and expanding the war for his own political benefit, given how he was blamed for the security failures that led up to the October 7 attack. President Biden acknowledged that these are the waning days of his administration, but it was in the interest of the world for his administration to work with Trump's incoming administration to get the deal done.
I'd also note this deal was developed and negotiated under my administration, but its terms will be implemented, for the most part, by the next administration. In these past few days, we've been speaking as one team. I told my team to coordinate closely with the incoming team to make sure we're all speaking with the same voice, because that's what American presidents do.
Lacking the same sense of courtesy and decency, Trump immediately took credit for the deal. Yet another example of Trump putting his name on something someone else built. This deal, which Netanyahu delayed for as long as humanly possible, has hung over Biden's head for more than a year and was arguably a key factor in Vice President Harris losing the election, as parts of the Democratic base peeled off and either stayed home or even voted for Trump as the so-called peace candidate. But what's past is past, and this deal is the present. It will include two phases. The first will last 6 weeks and includes a complete ceasefire, withdrawal of Israeli forces from populated areas of Gaza, and the release of a number of hostages. The exact number to be released was not specified, but would include women and the elderly. Israel will release hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, and Palestinians can return to their neighborhoods in all areas of Gaza, or what remains of those neighborhoods. During those 6 weeks, they will continue to work on phase 2, which will include discussion of rebuilding Gaza. While both Biden and Trump are taking credit for this deal, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the ceasefire agreement with Hamas is not complete and that final details are still being worked out. Netanyahu has not explicitly said whether he accepts the deal. Joining me now is Ayman Mohyeldin, host of Ayman on MSNBC, and former CIA Director John Brennan, MSNBC Senior National Security and Intelligence Analyst. Ayman, I do want to start with you because that later news that we just got not too long ago was a bit confusing. We saw the leader of Qatar come out and give a very lengthy statement. This deal seemed quite complete. You had President Biden come out and give a statement, and you saw Secretary of State Blinken and Vice President Harris standing behind him. It all seemed very complete. What is your reporting on Netanyahu seeming to somewhat walk it back?
Well, our colleagues at NBC have been reporting that for all intents and purposes, the Netanyahu, as a person, if you will, as the prime minister, has accepted it. But of course, now it has to work through a mechanism internally within both the Israeli security cabinet, the smaller cabinet of key decision makers pertaining to security matters, and then perhaps to a full-fledged cabinet vote within the next couple of days. But look, at the end of the day, there are people inside the Israeli cabinet that we know of who do not support this deal, who just within the last 48 hours were boasting about how they had blocked previous deals. So there is going to be some internal politics within Israel, and certainly within the cabinet, of trying to posture this deal as saying, look, we just are focusing on phase 1. Phase 2 gives us an out. We can manipulate this. We can kind of deal with this in different phases and in different ways. But for all intents and purposes, when you have the President of the United States and you have the Prime Minister of Qatar and the Egyptian government come out and say that a deal has been reached, you can rest assured that they have gotten an assurance from the Israeli Prime Minister that he is committed to this deal. Otherwise, they would not have done it. Look, I've been in touch with many of these leaders over the last 15 months, and I can assure you there were times when people were reporting a deal is imminent, and these negotiators were saying to me, no, they do not have the official yes from the key parties. And so as a result, it never materialized except today. So you can expect that in the next couple of days and even in the weeks, there will be political posturing inside Israel. Some will spin it in different ways. We've already seen some saying this is a bad deal. It should not be accepted. But you can rest assured that as of this evening, there is at least a commitment from the Israelis to the Americans, to the Egyptians, and to the Qataris that they want to begin this phase of the deal.
John Brennan, let me bring you in here because the reality is we've gotten to know the names of some Israeli officials, Itamar Ben-Gvir, Mr. Smotrich, who are far-right members of Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition. They keep him in power by being part of his coalition. They've been very much opposed to the deal, and as Ayman has said, bragging openly that they blocked this exact same deal, which has been on the table multiple times. Given that this is the exact same deal, nothing else has changed. Am I wrong to sort of make the Carter illusion that this was delayed and delayed and delayed in part to have the same deal come closer to Trump's taking power so that Trump could take credit for it? Does that ring true to you?
I think that may be part of it, Joy, but I also think that Bibi Netanyahu could have struck this deal 8 months ago when it was first offered by the Americans. But I think he wanted to further destroy Hamas and, in the process, further destroy Gaza. And if you look at what happened over the last 8 months, the thousands of people have been killed and just the destruction, turning Gaza really into just a pile of rubble. This is something that I think Netanyahu wanted to do. So, yes, he does have his right-wing cabinet members that he has to, take into account. But I do think he holds sway within that cabinet, and he could have forged this deal earlier. But again, I think he had an agenda, not just in Gaza, but I think at that time also he was anticipating that Lebanon and Hezbollah was going to also be in his target list. And so therefore, that's why he waited. But he gets a benefit now. With Trump coming in, he can offer a gift to the incoming administration, but also as a way to, I think, recognize the tremendous efforts that the Biden administration made over the past, year plus.
Yeah, I think Biden was right to come out and say this is his deal. It's a deal that he already had put on the table.